بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Respected brothers and sisters, we're continuing on. This is now our third session with regards to Dajjal. We've covered many different aspects of the Dajjal, and just as a quick recap, last week we had covered some of the trickery of the Dajjal, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give him certain abilities. We talked about his reality, who is he, who are the different possibilities. We talked about Ibn Sayyad, and we also discussed how we can reconcile between the different narrations. Where you have Tamim Dari radiyallahu anhu, his narration gives a certain description of the way Dajjal is, and then you have the other narrations which the Prophet ﷺ has mentioned, which gave a little bit of a different perception and a different description of the Dajjal. And we had the question come up, that Ibn Sayyad, he's appearing in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and Mahdi has not come. So many things have not appeared yet, but still Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, many Sahaba radiyallahu anhum, they feared that this man Ibn Sayyad, it's possible that he is the Dajjal. And how did we reconcile? We talked about the different possibilities of jinn and human, and what makes sense, how we can reconcile that Dajjal will take different forms from human beings. So in one instance, he was that big, huge man which was seen on the island, and in another instance, towards the end of times, he will appear in a different form, in the form of a young man with curly hair, with one eye. So like this, we can understand some of the different appearances of the Dajjal. And it also goes to show in another hadith where it is mentioned that once Dajjal starts harming the believers and he starts putting so much corruption, then the leader of the Muslims will say, well, why don't you just go out and wage war against this man? Why don't you just go out and fight him? And what will they say? They will say, هَذَا رَجُلٌ جِنِّيٌّ. They will say, this is a demonic type of person. He is not really a man, he's a jinn. He's a jinn. He's not really a human. All of these tricks that we see from him, this is not normal for a human being to have these qualities. This is something that a jinn has. That's just a quick recap that I'm giving you guys from last week. And inshallah, now we're going to move on to the next subjects that we have at hand. And the first one that I want to cover, and I'm not going to go too much into detail, but we'll give a glimpse towards this, is the hadith of Tamim Dari radiyallahu anhu, where he saw Dajjal chained up on an island. Where exactly is this island? Where is it that Dajjal could possibly be chained up right now? Where could this be? Right? So, to answer this question, dear brothers and sisters, the basic answer is nobody actually knows. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he did not give us the exact position, the exact location where Dajjal is going to be. Where he exactly is. Where is that place? Where is that island, that cave? The Prophet ﷺ did not give us that information. So the reality of this, Allahu A'lam. Allah knows the best. But many people, they have given different predictions. They have given their assumptions. They have done research and investigation and come to certain conclusions regarding this. And even amongst the Yahud, you don't find consistent answers. They're also confused and they don't give this information in a consistent manner. So there are two places which many researchers have mentioned. One is a place called the Devil's Sea. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that Dajjal will come out from the east. So this place, this area which is called the Devil's Sea, it's towards southeastern Japan. And you can just take a look at the name. It's called the Devil's Sea. You have a lot of volcanoes. You have a place which is called the deepest part of the ocean. This is all in this area called the Devil's Sea. You have volcanoes. You have things that are erupting. So the name itself gives an indication. This is a place of shaitan. A lot of satanic activity is taking place here. A lot of satanic planning is taking place here. Hence, it's given the name, Devil's Sea. And the second place that a lot of people believe is the Devil's Triangle. The Bermuda Triangle. And if you look at the symbolism behind the triangle, there's a lot of satanic symbolism with the triangle. You know, Freemasonry, satanic worship, all of these different cults. The triangle is one of their primary symbols that they use. So these are two of the main places that have been mentioned which have some substantiation and some type of backing. Right? Looking at it, it's from the east of the Arabian Peninsula. Right? When you go east, eventually you're going to end up towards the west, right? So in that sense, it is east of the Arabian Peninsula. And some researchers, like Isa Dawood, Hafidhullah, he says that this whole region, this whole area, that is a place where Dajjal will do his work. So even when he's unchained and he's released, he'll still be able to roam these areas in the sea and conduct a lot of his work from there. Right? And there's a lot of similarities between these two places. And ajib things that, even scientists, they become dumbfounded. They don't understand how and why certain things happen there. And like I said, we're just giving a little quick glimpse about this. Our topic is not to go into the inner depths of these two places. But as many of you probably know, many aircraft that were flying over suddenly disappeared. No trace, no sign. Nobody knows where they went. Many ships, you go there, you end up lost. Nobody hears from them again. Compasses don't work. There's a lot of magnetic force which is there. People say they saw UFOs. Wallahu a'lam. So, think about it. We have satellites everywhere. You have so much research that's taking place. You research the lives of ants, the lives of flies, how all these things operate and work and how they live and how they die. But the research on these places, nobody has conducted it yet and we still don't understand why. It seems like perhaps something is being hidden from us. Wallahu a'lam. There are also some research which says the scientists who tried to figure these things out, and they came up with certain conclusions, and when they tried to publish their research, they were found dead and found so-called suicide. Wallahu a'lam. You also see that the hadith mentions that the throne of shaitan, it's on top of the water. The throne of shaitan, it's in the water. And that shows you that this ocean and this whole area, this is a place where shaitan works. Dajjal and shaitan, they're best friends. They work together. So these are possible interpretations, wallahu a'lam, with regards to the place where exactly Dajjal is placed, where he is. And we mentioned last week, a very, very important we need to distinguish between these two things, is the release of Dajjal. That's one issue. And second, you have his emergence, when he's actually going to be influential amongst the people. So it's possible that he will first be released. He'll do all of his work undercover. He'll do all of the groundwork. He'll prepare everything. And then finally, once all the groundwork is done, he'll make his emergence. Right? So let's look at a possible timeline of Dajjal and how he's going to work. A timeline of his emergence and when he's going to do what he's going to do. So in order to understand this, we have to go back and we're going to look at the time of Daniel alayhi salam. So Daniel alayhi salam, he was a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's narrated about him that he made this dua that he wishes to be buried by the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Can you imagine? A prophet of Allah makes this dua and has this desire and has this wish that I want to be buried where and in which place? With the people of the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's where I want to be. And Allah made it such that his dua was answered. Right? His dua was answered. Ibn Kathir rahimahullah narrates that it was the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu. The Islamic Empire started expanding. They came to a place called Tastar or Tustar. And there they found the body of Daniel alayhi salam. And it was completely unchanged. They say except for a few hairs on the back of his head which turned white. Besides that, his body was completely intact. Right? And this is part of the miracle that the earth will not harm the bodies of the prophets. The people that die in Allah's path, they'll remain fresh. So his body was found and it was completely unchanged. Right? Abu Musa Ash'ari radiyallahu anhu, he went back and he told Umar radiyallahu anhu that this is what we found. So Umar radiyallahu anhu instructed them to bury Daniel alayhi salam in a place that nobody's going to know about. And why did he do this? Because the people at that time, they used to take the body of Daniel alayhi salam out of tabarruk, receiving blessings from it. And they would ask for rain. They would ask for different things from the blessings of Daniel alayhi salam. So Umar radiyallahu anhu was afraid that if people know where he's buried, they might exhume his body. They might, take him out for the sake of, trying to derive blessings from his body. So he decided that he should be buried in an undisclosed location. And together with this, they found, with the body of Daniel alayhi salam, they found a scroll. Some papers, scrolls that were written. And it was sent to Ka'b Ahbar radiyallahu anhu, who was a Muslim, but he was previously a scholar of the Ahlul Kitab. And he basically translated everything that was in those scrolls. What was in those scrolls? We don't know 100% for sure. Right? But there are some indications. Right? And Daniel alayhi salam, just as a side point, with his body they found his ring. And on his ring, Abu Musa Ash'ari, he got it. It was a ring that had two small lions with a human being in between. And why was this? This was because in the time of Daniel alayhi salam, he was tested. And the king of his time decided that he should be thrown to the lions. He wanted to execute him and murder him in a very bad way. When he threw him to the lions, the lion and the lioness, what did they do? They came together, they started hugging, cuddling, and licking Daniel alayhi salam. They started playing with him. So from the miracles of Daniel alayhi salam, he had this inscribed in his ring to remind him of Allah's favor upon him. So going back to Daniel alayhi salam and those scrolls, there are some narrations from Ka'b Ahbar himself, which talks about Daniel alayhi salam. So that's why a lot of people, they say, this is possibly what was written on those scrolls. And in a nutshell, I'm going to tell you what was there and what was written. So as we mentioned about Bukht Nasr, right? He was one of the tyrant rulers, tyrant kings and leaders of the past. He had a dream. And it was very, very frightening. And this guy was a tyrant. So he really wanted that dream to be interpreted and find out how he could save himself. So from all of the people, he got Daniel alayhi salam to interpret this dream. And what was the dream that he saw? He saw a dream that there's a huge idol. And the upper portion, the head portion is like gold. And other portions are silver. Other portions are like iron, clay. It's made up of 4 different parts. And eventually, this idol is growing bigger and bigger and bigger. And eventually what happens? There's a huge rock that completely shatters this idol and breaks it into pieces. And that rock, it starts to grow, and it gets bigger and bigger. What you can understand from this dream is that it was a prophecy that empires will grow. Civilizations, they'll get a lot of power and they'll grow bigger and bigger and bigger. But eventually what's going to happen? All of these civilizations of disbelief, of oppression, eventually they're going to get rocked. They're going to get hammered and they're going to shatter into pieces. And what's going to be that rock which is going to break it? It is the light of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It is the light of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam that is eventually going to break all of these down, right? And indications have been given that the empires of Babylon, the Persian Empire, the Roman Empire, and also the Greeks, all of them, they came to an end. All of these nations came to an end. And that's possibly why when the Prophet ﷺ was born, what happened on the night that he was born? The Persians, their big huge castle, it started to tremble and shake. And 14 of their balconies broke down. They had a huge fire that was burning for 1,000 years. All of the sudden, extinguished. This is from the miracles of the Prophet ﷺ. So what does it show you? The light of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it signified the ending of these oppressive nations. That's what we see from the narrations mentioned by Ibn Kathir rahimahullah and others as well. But now there is another prophecy of Daniel alayhi salam, which possibly was from that scroll as well, but we don't see it in our own narrations, right? And many ulama, they have looked into the Bible, in the book of Daniel, to get possible understanding from this. And since it's from the Ahlul Kitab, this is the criteria that we follow. لا نصدق ولا نكذب. We don't say 100% that it's true. We don't say 100% that it's false. Is it from the portion that was changed? Or could it possibly be from the portion that was, could have possibly been preserved? We don't know. So this portion here, Wallahu a'lam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. But I'm going to give you the gist of what was seen by Daniel alayhi salam in his own dream, which is narrated in the Bible. There were 4 beasts which Daniel alayhi salam saw in his dream. One of them, it had a lion's head. And it had the wings of an eagle. And it was standing upright. Okay, that's the first one. Lion with eagle's wings, and it was made to stand upright. Second, it was a bear with 3 ribs in its mouth and it's eating flesh. You can see how it's like a tyrant eating flesh. Very, very savage. And the third was a leopard, 4 heads and 4 wings. Domination. And fourth, Daniel alayhi salam said, it was such a beast that was so huge, it was completely different from the rest. It was a completely different category. Like, you thought the first three were hard. You thought the first three were tyrants and strong and powerful. This fourth is a different category. 10 horns, iron teeth, and from amongst the horns there was a little tiny horn which popped out and was speaking a lot. You guys understand? Mm-hmm. This is what Daniel alayhi salam, what he saw according to the Bible. Alright, so it's basically 4 beasts. And wallahu a'lam, if you tie it up with the previous dream that we have in our narrations, like Ibn Kathir, it could possibly show that these are also 4 civilizations or 4 types of rulership that would eventually be destroyed. Right? So, again, wallahu a'lam, researchers have investigated into this, right, from amongst the ulama. So these are possibilities. Wallahu a'lam, we cannot say for sure. And this whole discussion has been mentioned by my teacher in South Africa, Maulana Rizwan Kaji, hafidhahullah. Number 1, the lion with the wings. This could be in reference towards the British Empire, England, right? And we don't need to go into the details, but we all know what type of colonialism and oppression these nations have committed. These empires have committed in their history. It's nothing hidden. We all know about it. From conquering lands, colonizing them, enslaving the population. These are things that are not hidden. It's a reality from all of us. And why do we say that this is England? Because from their emblem, the symbol of the royal family, it is a lion. So possibly, wallahu a'lam. It's on their coat of arms also. It's the symbol they use is the lion. Number 2, the bear that was seen. 3 ribs eating flesh. Very, very savage-like. Ulama have said it's possible that this is the USSR, Russia. When in that time, in the Cold War and in those times, what did they do? They completely annihilated, completely destroyed villages that they would come upon, finish everything and wipe out entire communities, wipe out everything that they see. Number 3, you had the leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads. This could be referring to Germany, right? We all know Germany acquired lots of power when they were under Hitler. They rushed to power. And the leopard or panther, what relationship does it have with Germany? Wallahu a'lam. Some people, they give the relationship that they had a lot of weaponry that were known as panthers. Leopard, panther, almost like the same thing, right? So they had like a navy vessel was called the Panther. They had tanks that were called Panthers. And they even had units that were called Panzer divisions. So that leopard or panther could be representing Germany, right? And the 4th beast that was unlike the rest, 10 horns, very, very powerful, shows you what? That it's got a lot of dynamite packed inside. Not 1 wing, not 2 wings. It's got 10 horns, sorry. Not 1 horn or 2 horns. It's got 10 horns. What does that show you? It's got a lot of dynamite packed inside of it. It's got a lot of help and support and a lot of people combined to make up what it is. Right? So this, wallahu a'lam, a lot of people say it's possible that it could be the UN. And that small horn that was seen amongst those horns, which had a big mouth that was talking, according to the narration. That horn could be Israel. Because it's small, right? It's small, it boasts, and it's protected by what? All of its surroundings and people that are there for it, right? Remember your stimulus checks, why it's only $600. So from these dreams of Danyal alayhi salam, you had 4 empires that were before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then you had 3 empires afterwards, and the final one could possibly be what we're seeing today. Wallahu a'lam. And if you look further into the Bible, it makes mention of the new modern Babylon. We talked about Babylon in a lot of detail, where a lot of the magic and evil things came out from. So in Revelations, they talk about the new modern Babylon. Okay? And in that chapter, this is what it says. It talks about a great immoral woman that sits upon many waters. A great immoral woman that sits upon many waters. Right? The US has what? A big navy surrounded by many waters. Right? And it's talking about an immoral woman. Is there any woman that has a connotation with the US that sits on water? The Statue of Liberty. Wallahu a'lam. These are all possibilities. In her hand is a cup of abominations. By your magic spell, all other nations were led astray. Which country leads all other countries as far as its entertainment, as far as its music, as far as its Hollywood, as far as all of its culture, its style? Right? Allah forgive us. You hear in Medina Munawwara, in Makkah Mukarramah, you hear people, reading Tupac lyrics. You hear them, reciting songs from the USA. Now, Dajjal and Shaitan, they use a lot of symbols. Because like we said, Dajjal comes from Dajjal. He's hidden. He used trickery. This is how he tricks people. It's not like he's going to just come up to you one day and be like, hey, I'm Dajjal. You want to follow me? It's not going to be like that. He's going to trick people. He will manipulate people. He will use people. He will make himself look in a way that he's not. Right? So, a lot of it has to do with symbolism. Right? If you look at the Statue of Liberty, it's about 34 meters tall. And according to the narrations, Adam alayhi salam, he was created at about, what was his height? About 28 meters. So the Statue of Liberty is a little bit taller than Adam alayhi salam. And we discussed this, that Shaitan, what is his objective? He wants to lead who astray? Mankind. Why does he want to lead mankind astray? Because he was jealous and angry at who? Adam alayhi salam. So the Statue of Liberty being taller than his original height is kind of like what? It's kind of like a boasting. That look, this thing is even taller than Adam alayhi salam. On top of the head of Statue of Liberty is what? The cup. And what's inside of it? Fire. What is Shaitan created from? Jannat are created from what? They're created from fire. Where is that fire placed? On top of the head. What does that show you? Symbolism again. That we have accepted the authority and we have accepted as our superior, what? Shayateen and Jinnat. We've accepted them as our superiors and as our authorities. And then on the feet, you see, there are shackles or chains. You're going to have to hold it. Press it. There you go. On the feet, you will see shackles and chains. What does that show you? The shackles and restrictions of religion. You are now free. You're unbound. Do as you wish. Do what your desires demand you to do. Right? And there's also more. You know, you look at the dollar bill. There's the issue of the whole New World Order. You have the one eye. The eagle is on there with 13 olives, 13 arrows. Right? Dajjal, it says in the hadith, he's going to come with the paradise, he's going to come with the fire. Right? So, in one hand, that eagle has 13 olives. It's good things. It's like a Jannah. And if you don't accept that, then what is in the other hand? Arrows. What's arrows? War. Fire. That's bloodshed, basically. And again, these are not things from the Quran. These are not things that are clearly mentioned in hadith. But these are things that people have put two and two together. Right? Two and two together based on investigation. So we can't say with certainty that this is exactly how it is. But it's a huge possibility, right? And as we're going to get into the time of Dajjal, you know, this is like a puzzle and it's like a maze. That's why a lot of researchers on this topic of signs of Qiyamah, you know what they say? They say, trying to piece together this puzzle on the signs of Qiyamah, it's a Qiyamah on its own. Right? Mapping this, putting this map together, putting the pieces of the puzzle where they belong, trying to decipher these codes that are there for the signs of Qiyamah. This is Qiyamah on its own. Just trying to figure all of these things out. Right? Because remember, this is a test. If everything was going to be so clearly spelt out for you, Dajjal is going to come in 2035. He's going to appear exactly in this city. Exactly like this. Exactly the hadith means this. If everything was so clearly spelled out to you, where's the test then? So some things have been left vague. And that's been like that on purpose. Right? So we're now going to discuss a timeline on Dajjal. So right now you kind of got a glimpse from the dream of Daniel alayhi salam. The final beast was what? Is what we're in right now. That would mean that the emergence and the release has already taken place and it's just about time. Right? If you take it in that sense. You also see that in the time of the Prophet alayhi salam, you had Sahaba and Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam himself. They saw Ibn Sayyad and they were afraid that this could possibly be the Dajjal. Right? So, you know, sometimes in today's time people say, man, Dajjal can't come anytime soon. You still have to have Mahdi and you have to have this and you have to have that and it's not possible right now. Well, if that's the case, why was the Prophet ﷺ looking at Ibn Sayyad and seeing that maybe he's Dajjal? Why were Sahaba worried and afraid in their time, 1400 years ago? Right? So it shows you that there's no contradiction in that. Another thing that we have to look at when we see Dajjal is the conquest of Constantinople. One of the signs of the end of times is that Constantinople, modern day Istanbul, is going to be conquered by the Muslims. This is one of the signs towards the ends of times, right? So with regards to this, there are two opinions. The first opinion is that, look, in the times of the Ottomans, Sultan Muhammad Fatih, he had conquered Constantinople. That prophecy is done, right? And then again, once you start coming closer towards the ends, the real ends, then what's going to happen? Constantinople will be conquered a second time. That's one interpretation. But some ulama, according to their research, they are of the opinion that that first conquest that took place in the Ottoman Empire, that was the prophecy of the conquest of Constantinople. There's not going to be a second one happening. The coming out of Dajjal, it's related to that first one. Right? And now we're going to look at some of the reasons why. There's a hadith mentioned by Abu Dawood rahimahullah, which says that the Jerusalem becoming inhabited, that is going to be the cause of Medina becoming less inhabited. And Baytul Maqdis, it was in the time of Umar radiyallahu anhu. And a lot of people, they left Mecca, they left Medina, and they went towards Jerusalem, they went towards Syria, they went towards Sham, all these different places. And once Medina becomes uninhabited, that is when you'll have a lot of wars taking place. Right? And remember, in the beginning of this series, we talked a lot about that. The Khawarij, Uthman, Umar radiyallahu anhum, Ali radiyallahu anhu, a lot of battles that took place during that time. وَخُرُوجُ الْمَلْحَمَةِ, and all of these battles taking place, that will eventually lead to the conquering of Constantinople. And the conquering of Constantinople, that is the coming out of Dajjal. So you can see the link, right? You have Baytul Maqdis, that's going to lead to Medina becoming less inhabited. Once that happens, big wars are going to take place. Once the big wars take place, Constantinople will be conquered. And once that becomes conquered, now you have Dajjal is coming out. Right? So, like I said, there are two interpretations with regards to this. One is, it already happened, and one is that second time it's going to happen again. Now, the reason some people say that it's the conquest that already took place is because the narrations make mention of the walls of Constantinople. And we covered some of this in this class also. The walls played a huge part in the war that happened, because they had fortified walls. One set of them, second set of them, third set of them, archers on the top. The walls were like a primary defense, which made it so hard to conquer that place. Right? And once a lot of the walls were broken down, they weren't even repaired. The walls don't even have much significance anymore. Right? So the fact that the narrations mention those walls give an indication that it was referring to the one that had already happened. Right? And then there's a narration which Imam Hakim mentions, rahimahullah. He says that once, he's quoting the Prophet ﷺ in a hadith, that in the conquest of Constantinople, what will you see? You will see the Muslims will be building masajid. Once that takes place, the Muslims will build masajid. So building masajid, this is something that's very normal. Right? What's so great about, mashallah, building a masjid is something very, very auspicious, of course. But why did the Prophet ﷺ mention this out of everything? Like, of course Muslims are going to build masajid, right? That's like saying, and the Muslims will pray. Of course they're going to pray. Of course they're going to build masjids. That's what we do for our communities. But what was so significant about the Prophet ﷺ mentioning it here? Right? We all know, right now, if you look in the world, what are some of the most famous, most beautified, most adorned masajid that exist in the world right now? It's in Turkey. Right? And again, I'm quoting to you from my ustad in South Africa, Maulana Rizwan, Hafidhahullah. You have the Sultan Muhammad Fatih Masjid, the Blue Mosque. You have the Sulaymaniya Masjid. Look at the architecture and how beautiful those things are. You will not see other masajid like that, especially considering the time that it was built. Right? So the Prophet made specific mention of this, alayhi salam, and he said, وَيَغْزُونَ وَرَاءَ ذَلِكَ. You will continuously fight after this until Dajjal comes out. So if you look at a history of the Ottomans, there was about 133 battles that took place. So the fact that the Prophet ﷺ said, you will continuously fight. They fought 133 battles, the Ottomans. Right? So it kind of shows that there was a relationship with this. the next thing you see is that the narration says, after the conquest of Constantinople, it will be said that Dajjal has come out. And they will see that it's a small lie. That's the words that the Prophet ﷺ used for it. It's going to be a small lie. And then eventually what's going to happen? The real Dajjal will actually come out. But at first, it's just going to be a small lie, right? So, some researchers have suggested it like this, that following the Ottoman Empire, what happened? You had a great collapse in the Muslim world, huge void that has still not been filled. And then you also had a lot of Dajjali inventions and scientific things that were taking place, right? And going back to the whole issue of Harut and Marut, and the issues of magic and how they started developing all of these things, right? And I told you guys last week I would talk a little bit about how this has developed into a modern thing of study and research and learning. It's a science which they call Kabbalah, right? And we don't need to delve into all of their filth, right? But I'll just tell you a little bit about it. It's a like hidden, mysterious science. Some of them, the people that practice it, they themselves say it comes from Babylon. That's where it originated. And we know from our sources, Babylon was where they used numbers and symbols to unlock things. And we know a lot about these symbols and numbers. And we talked about how Harut and Marut, part of the magic that they taught was what? Putting symbols and numbers and putting it into a certain sequence, and then it gives you a certain result. So it really aligns with this. Some have said it's the secret code that governs the universe. It's the knowledge of hidden forces, how they are structured, and how they influence us. So with all of that stuff building up, right, you had initially some increase, right? You had the Renaissance, you had the Age of Enlightenment, right? 16th century, 17th century, a lot of people started sailing, discovering new lands, right? As they say. So a lot of this is intertwined with these inventions as part of this satanic knowledge which they were learning from the magic. And then eventually 20th century comes, and now what do you have? Full throttle. It's not small inventions anymore. It's not small little things taking place. Now you've reached the age where it's full force. There's, helicopters, there are nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, there's cloning, right? So much more is taking place, which has never taken place before. So to say, that first little bit that came out, that was a little lie that Dajjal is coming. He's not really out yet. He's just showing you a little glimpse of what he can do. And then eventually what's going to happen? Oh, now he's really here. Look where it's reached now. So you can see how these different interpretations have been given, right? If you look at the hadith of Tamim Dari, Dajjal said what? He said, my time is coming soon. How long was he imprisoned for? If you say that Sulaiman alayhi salam is the one that chained him up, and we talked last week how it makes a lot of sense that Sulaiman alayhi salam was the one who chained him up. That was 1500 years before the Prophet alayhi salam. And now it's been how long since the Prophet ﷺ? It's been 1400 years. So it wouldn't make sense for him to say, if he had been in prison for 1500 years already, to say that my time is soon, and now 1400 years have passed and he's still locked up. It doesn't make sense. If his time was soon, and he had already been locked up 1500 years ago, that means he should have been released by now. Which means the groundwork and all of the things that he's going to start to display, the effort has already begun for that. Right? There's an interesting narration. Abu Dawood rahimahullah narrates, and Imam Hakim also narrates. He says, إِنَّهُ يَصِيحُ ثَلَاثَ صَيْحَاتٍ يَسْمَعُهُنَّ أَهْلُ الْمَشْرِقِ وَالْمَغْرِبِ. He will let out 3 screams the east and the west, they will hear these three screams. Again, it's very vague. What exactly do these three screams mean? It's possible, maybe, a scream like that. Wallahu a'lam. But some researchers, they've suggested that this scream of Dajjal, the first one could refer to World War I. The second one could refer to World War II. And the third scream, which is what we're waiting for, is the final scream, the Armageddon. Right? And if you look at, from a historical aspect, what happened with the first two world wars? What did it result in? You basically had the British mandate, and it eventually led to the State of Israel. That's what it ended up with. And as we know, where are the followers of Dajjal going to be? They're going to be exactly from there. That's his place, and those are the people that will support him. So it's as if to show that those huge things that have happened, right? World War I, World War II, lots of technology developing for those things to happen, right? Guns, bombs, tanks, all of these developments. And the end result was what? In benefit for Dajjal. So that could show that he had a hand in it. Part of his shaitanic plot and plan was from there. So again, Wallahu A'lam, these are just some possibilities. The reality, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Now we're going to take a look, inshallah, at some of Dajjal's powers, right? So, Musnad Ahmad, he quotes that the Prophet ﷺ said, Dajjal will have a mountain of bread with him. So, in other words, it's showing he's going to control the provisions of people. He will control the provisions of people. The wealth is not going to benefit you at that time. Another narration says, the people that deny Dajjal and they refuse him, they will not have anything of their wealth. None of their wealth will be with them. Right? So, a mountain of bread. And subhanAllah, you can see, this is also part of Rasulullah ﷺ's truth. How he was a truthful Nabi. Because at that time, you would not have mountains of bread. Right? Nowadays, you have lots of bread because you're adding all these preservatives and things like that. In those times, there's no fridge. You make something, you eat it right away, otherwise it's going to go bad. Right? People who believe in him, they'll get rains, they'll get lots of vegetation. He'll command the sky, it'll give water. He'll command the earth, and it's going to produce vegetation. Their animals are going to come nice big humps, lots of milk, very, very nice and fat. And the people who disbelieve in him, they're not going to have anything. Right? And the people who disbelieve in him, they'll go through a lot of hard times. They'll go through a lot of difficulties. But the Prophet ﷺ, he reminded us, هُوَ أَهْوَنُ عَلَى اللَّهِ مِنْ ذَلِكَ. He's not that what you think him to be. The power of Islam and the power of Iman, it will always be more than the power of Shaitan and Dajjal. Don't be in awe of his power and his miracles. Whatever he has, it is limited to that extent which Allah has given him. And that's why the narration mentions that young boy, that young man, he will come to Dajjal and he will fight against him. Dajjal will slice him in half. He'll bring him back to life. And you'll say, don't you believe? Do you believe now that I'm Dajjal? And what's that young man going to say to him? He says, you are Dajjal, and I'm even more convinced now that you are actually Dajjal. You're not going to convince me for anything. I know for sure even more now that you are Dajjal. And Dajjal's not going to be able to touch that guy after that. So what does that show you? The power of your faith and the power of your Iman, that is what's going to save you. Not even knowledge of Dajjal will save you. Knowledge itself is not going to save you. People are not going to look at him and say, one eye. Let me check my notes from the End of Time series with Mufti Rohullah. Let's see, he's one eye. Let's take a look. Oh, he's got one eye. Check. Curly hair. Oh, it's kind of curly. Okay, check mark number 2. Vegetation. Let's see what kind of fruits he got. Oh, I see some cucumbers and tomatoes. All right, check. That's not how it's going to work. He'll deceive. He'll be tricky. Your knowledge won't save you. It's your faith and your iman that's going to save you. Right? Similar to how you're questioned in the grave. You ask a 8-year-old in maktab class, who is your Lord? He'll say Allah. Who is the Prophet? He'll say Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What is your book? He'll say Quran. It's not knowledge that's going to answer. It's your iman. It's what's in your heart. Right? And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said, beware and stay far, far away from him. Part of this, brothers and sisters, that he will command the sky and it'll give vegetation, it'll give rain, and the earth, he'll command it and it'll start to grow crops. Some researchers have suggested that look at how in the modern age, farmers that used to do things the natural way, they have no power anymore. They're completely out of business. A lot of them that for generations, they've been farming, they're out of the picture now. Who has taken over the industry? Agricultural engineers. The people that could take the seeds, add things into them, put chemicals inside of them, right? And make them grow a certain way, deal with certain pests, right? You just think about it. If you had a farm and someone threw some pests inside, and they said the pesticide that's going to help those things grow, your crops grow properly, and those little insects are not going to harm them, we're not going to give that to you. We're going to keep it for ourselves. What would happen? Their crops would grow and your crops would not. Very, very simple. These things are not far-fetched. You see what I mean? It could very, very possibly be happen. Very possible that it could happen like this. Hybrid seeds, right? Fertilizers, all these kinds of things. The treasures of the earth will follow him, like bees. He will tell the earth, "Akhriji kunuzaki," take out your treasures, and the earth will pull out all of its treasures for him, right? And subhanallah, if you look at this, you can see that right now you have so many wealthy countries full of resources, gold, diamonds, silver, all of these things, but amongst the poorest countries in the world. Why? Because it's all dominated by corporations. A selected handful of people, they're in ownership of all of this. These huge elite corporations, right? Gold, oil, diamonds, coal, all of these things. There's a lady by the name of Karen Hughes. She's a Yale graduate. She talks about the World Bank and other mega corporations that dominate the planet. Okay, this is a very intelligent woman. Look what she says. She says there are 147, how many? 147 very closely knit mega corporations that control 40% of the entire global economy. 147, they're all buddies, one close-knit group, 40% of the global economy. These people, they control. And look what she says. She says the aim is nothing less than to create a world system. New world order, right? World system of what? Financial control in private hands, to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. Exactly how Dajjal will operate. And there's another narration in Kitabul Fitan. He says the majority of followers and agents of Dajjal will be what? People of interest. And how do these big, world banks and all of these things, how do they all operate? All based off of interest, right? And the interesting thing is that, remember, the first international banking system was developed by who? The Templar Knights. We talked about it last week. So a lot of people, they say that these big corporations, they are the followers of those same people, right? And if you look at historically, right, wealth has always had a backing. So back in the days, like for example, if you had $100 in the bank, they would have gold which represented that $100. Right? And nowadays that whole system has been obliterated. So literally your wealth, there's no backing to it. It's just a bunch of pieces of paper. And when the people want to gain dominance and get more money, what do they have to do? Just print. That's it. And they have control. And slowly but surely we're seeing that we're living in a day and age where you have to use your card. And slowly but surely people are being encouraged, right, to do all of their dealings and transactions on these cards and forget about paper money. The gold and silver, that's already out of the picture. So the first step was getting the gold out and using paper. And now, get rid of the paper and use cards. What will happen if these global industries and huge banks, World Bank, if they see that you're a certain person that's against Dajjal, and they say, okay, all of your assets are frozen. What are you going to do? Your money, dollar bills, sorry, we don't accept those anymore. You got to have a card. We want to monitor where all the money is going and coming. So only things that could be tracked through your card. And now your card doesn't work anymore. We refuse to accept it. Now, you can see it's not something that's far-fetched, right? And there's a really good book. It's called Confessions of an Economic Hitman. It talks about one of these businessmen. He gives his own personal account of how they would knowingly rip countries off and put people in huge amounts of debt and poverty and hunger, just so that these few elite corporations, they'll reap in all of the benefits. Let's talk about Dajjal's conveyance. The hadith mentioned that he'll drive an extremely white donkey. What color are airplanes? They're usually white. This donkey will have very, very thick skin. What are airplanes made of? Foam? Metal, steel. Each step of the donkey will cover a day's journey. Very, very fast. It will outpace the sun as it sets. If you've ever been traveling, right, in a certain direction, you see, man, Maghrib is coming in. It's almost time for Maghrib. And Maghrib just doesn't come to an end. There's light the whole way. Because you're like riding with the sun. And Imam Hakim rahimahullah, he narrates in his Mustadrak that from all of the conveyances, only the donkey will remain subservient to him. Meaning he'll have other forms of transport that will be available to him, but the main thing that he will utilize and what he will have the upper hand in is his donkey, which represents aircraft. Right? And you can see that today. And the Prophet ﷺ said, فَهُوَ رِجْسٌ عَلَى رِجْسٍ. So he is dirt riding dirt. Dajjal himself, he's dirt, and what is he riding on? He's riding on dirt. All of his donkeys and his conveyances and his technology, that's also dirt in itself. And subhanAllah, some people have derived from this that one of the most toxic things that are out there, greatest form of pollution is what? The emissions from an airplane. And look, the Prophet ﷺ described it as what? Rijs, dirt, filth, pollution. Medicine. Dajjal will give cure to the person who's born blind. He'll cure the leper. He'll give life to the dead. And he'll announce, I am your Lord. Imam Tabarani. Right now, according to some medical health professionals, they say with, resuscitation, up to 2 hours after someone dies, you could bring them back. That's what they claim right now. And many doctors believe that this time will be increased. There are articles from many doctors. One of them, Dr. Sam Parnia. He has a book called Erasing Death. In this book, he says, he believes that soon, up to 24 hours after someone is declared dead, they could resuscitate them back to life. That's what they're claiming now. Right? Efforts have begun for curing people who have been born blind by taking cells and transplanting them into the person's eye. Right? The narrations mention He will cause the sky to send down rain. Have you guys heard of cloud seeding? There's something called cloud seeding. It's a whole thing where they mess around with the clouds and the number of chemicals and things like that, the biology of what's happening up there, and it causes plants to grow. It causes rain to fall down. And literally, there are certain countries that have been spending millions of dollars on this cloud seeding to basically send down artificial rain, right? And the ajib thing about it is, it's very toxic. And a lot of the lands that this rain falls on, it becomes infertile. It just messes up the whole land, right? So you can imagine, if they want to stop crops growing on a certain place, just send this acid rain down and things could stop. The 40 days on earth issue, right? One day like a year, one day like a month, right? And then the rest of the days like normal days. Aw kama qala alayhi salam. The days some will extend longer than others. A lot of people have researched and said that this 40, it could refer to time periods. It doesn't have to be specifically 1 year, this many months, this many days, no, but just generally speaking, it'll be a time frame, vaguely, which the Prophet ﷺ has described. And there's interesting research that has been done, that there are certain machines that have been created that are doing work on the Earth's ionosphere. And because of this, it pulls on the Earth like at different wavelengths or whatever the case may be, and it affects the gravitational pull on the Earth, which could have an effect on time. So, Wallahu A'lam. They call this program HAARP, H-A-A-R-P. If you want to check it up later on your own, go ahead. But I'm not going to go too much into these things because Allah knows best how this is going to work. So, as a quick understanding more of Dajjal, the Yahud, this is the person that is, according to them, their savior. He's going to give them power. He's going to, give them their lost glory and rule and their empire that they've been hoping for, right? When discussing the powers of Dajjal, some of the Yahud in the time of Rasulullah ﷺ, they would say, when he comes and leads us, نَصْنَعُ كَذَا وَكَذَا. We will invent such and such, we will manufacture such and such. So it shows you their understanding of how Dajjal's powers will work is going to be how? Through like a scientific type of way. This is what they would say, the people, the Yahud in that time. It's mentioned that in Kitab al-Fitan, Dajjal will command the river of Abu Futrus, which is now known as the Yarkan River. It will flow in the direction whichever he calls it to. When he orders it to dry up, it will dry up. This river, in World War I, it was given to the Israeli Electric Company. And now, what has happened? They have literally turned the direction of the river to irrigate certain lands. So the direction has been changed. And because of a lot of pollution that has been taking place, its water has started to dry up. And for the end of the Dajjal, يَذُوبُ ذُوبَانَ الشَّمَعِ. Once Isa alayhi salam comes down on the eastern minaret of the masjid in Damascus, on the wings of two angels, he will be sweating down like pearls will be flowing from his head and his forehead. And once he comes down, the Yahud, 70,000 of them, they will be with Dajjal. And his ending will be at a place called Babilud. And Isa alayhi salam, he will say, do not come between me and him. and Dajjal will flee. He'll try and run away. And once Isa alayhi salam catches up to him, Dajjal will melt, according to different narrations, like how a candle melts. And according to some narrations, how lead melts. And the third narration says, like how salt dissolves into water. He's going to just melt away. Right? And before we end off, I want to show you guys some pictures here. So let me just tell you the other hadith before I show you the pictures. In the narration of Musnad Ahmad, Dajjal will come on the outskirts of Medina, because remember, he can't enter Medina. And he will say, أَتَرَوْنَ هَذَا الْقَصْرَ الْأَبْيَض. Do you see this white castle? And they'll say yes. And he'll say, this is the Masjid of Ahmad, of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Keep that in mind. He won't be able to enter Medina, because remember, Allah will protect it from Dajjal. There will be angels around Medina. And then there will be 3 earthquakes that will strike Medina, and the hypocrites, they'll run out. They'll run away. They'll leave Medina. Medina will be left pure. Right? He'll have paradise and a fire. Prophet ﷺ said, choose the fire, and it is actually going to be a paradise for you. Right? Now let's take a look at this. Let's see how I can share my screen. Okay, this is the masjid in Damascus. Can you guys see it? So you can see the right side, right here. This is the minara, the white minaret of the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus, which many say this would be where Isa alayhi salam will descend. That's it from a closer view. Now keep in mind the masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In his time, this is what it might have looked like. Basically the dirt on the floor, that is your carpet. Right? It wasn't white in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was brown in his time, because they would build like this. But look in the narration, he says, when Dajjal sees the Masjid Nabawi, he will say, do you see that white castle? And look how Masjid Nabawi looks now. It's pure white. You can see there. And if you've ever seen, there's also another image, you guys can check it up on your own. But even from space, NASA has images. When you look at Masjid Nabawi and when you look at the Haramain, Makkah and Medina, they're shining white, even from space. And look how, and this construction took place during the Ottomans. So that's also, it kind of shows you, the Medina that Dajjal will see is what kind of Medina? The one with the white masjid, and we already have the white masjid.